I've been talking about anime on the internet for the better half of the past decade or so, although I've slowed down quite a bit when talking at least semi-regularly on the Anime Man channel about the thing that is in the title of my channel name. I've always still had a very firm grasp on the interest when it comes to the overall Japanese animation culture and all of the interesting and cool things that are surrounding this idea of manga and anime and all adjacent Japanese media. As much as I may not be talking about it in video format like this, I'm still regularly reading new manga, watching new anime. I'm thoroughly enjoying Free Rent Season 2 right now as we speak. But there is also a part of me that just cannot deny that, I don't know, man, anime has gotten kind of boring lately. Now, mind you, I have seen a lot of anime in my lifetime. I have entire videos where I go over some of the worst anime ever made, some of the best anime ever made, the oldies, the newbies, you name it. I've pretty much perused through the entirety of notable or worth talking about anime and manga series in, again, the past decade plus career that I've had on the internet. So it might just be a natural progression for me as someone who is also getting older that maybe anime just isn't really what it used to be anymore, or perhaps it's just a personal thing for me. Maybe anime is just as good as it's ever been, but I've fallen off of it. Either way, I think the argument can be made. But then I found this particular article from automatonmedia.com. Kadokawa reports a sharp decline in publishing. Anime businesses fall into deficit due to a lack of popular sequels. Now, Kadokawa is, pretty close to my heart considering the fact that Geeks Plus, the agency that I'm a part of, is owned by Kadokawa. And I think there is no denying that I think out of the big publishing companies in Japan producing manga, anime, and all that adjacent media, Kadokawa is pretty high up there in some of the most well-known ones. You know, we have Kadokawa, we have Shueisha, we have Kodansha, we have Shogakukan. But this article was really interesting to me, so I wanted to read through it and kind of, I guess, discuss a broader perspective on what might be the issue of anime in the modern day, or where potentially modern anime is headed towards. Kadokawa, the parent company of From Software and Geeks Plus, represent, and several major anime studios recently announced its consolidated financial results for the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2026. According to GameBiz, the company reported a year-on-year decline in profits across its publishing, manga, print, ebooks, and video game segments, while its anime business slipped into the red and posted a net loss. In publishing, revenue actually grew overseas, especially in the US and Asia, but overall segment profit fell 90.2% compared to the previous year. I guess that makes sense considering the fact that anime has gotten just so much more mainstream, not only in Japan, but especially in the West. And as we've touched upon in previous articles on this very channel, it seems like a lot of publishing companies, distribution companies in the anime and manga world are really putting their focus towards the West, because again, the overall market, just in sheer numbers, is so much greater than in Japan. You know, even if the entirety of the Japanese population were to be consuming anime, there is still a larger pool of fish across the pond. And yet, for some reason, we are seeing such a massive dip, which doesn't really make sense. You think that the fact that there are more people consuming this content more than ever would result in greater profits, but it doesn't seem like the numbers are telling the same story. Kadokawa attributed the drop primarily to lower revenue per title in Japan, as well as higher personnel expenses that further narrowed profit margins. The publisher's game business saw profit down 7% year-on-year, but Kadokawa notes that this is largely the result of exceptional sales of Elden Ring's base game and Shadow of the Erdtree expansion in the previous fiscal year. I mean, yeah, it was pretty much an inescapable game when it came out. I mean, you know, you don't even have to have played Elden Ring or Shadow of Erdtree to know about it. You probably have someone in your immediate group who is just absolutely obsessed with it. I know I have plenty of friends who are absolutely obsessed with it. Even though I personally never really got into it, I respect the fuck out of it as just a piece of media for sure. On the other hand, when it comes to anime and films, Kadokawa posted a net loss of 940 million yen, or about 6.13 million US dollars. That's pretty substantial. The company says this is a result of a big chunk of its lineup being made up of first-time anime adaptations, as opposed to sequels to established established popular series, leading to lower revenue per title. For the full fiscal year, Kadokawa expects weaker performance across all major profit margins, and we have here a bunch of numbers that you guys can check out. Overall, 940 million yen loss in the anime world, and the company reckons it's because of a bunch of first-time anime adaptations, which is basically, in the case with Kadokawa, just a nicer way of saying, oh, we adapted a bunch of recently published isekai light novels, which make up for like 80 to 90% of light novels published by Kadokawa as of recently, and big fucking shocker, no one cares. They keep continuing to produce these isekai slop that people are just going to forget after the first episode, if they even give it a chance to begin with, because let's be real, even just reading the synopsis and ridiculous titles of some of these isekai slop anime just makes me want to swear off anime for the rest of my life. And it's interesting, it says here, as opposed to sequels to established popular series. Obviously, even though there is so much more of a larger group of people who are consuming anime and consuming Japanese media that Kadokawa produces, for example, including manga and light novels as well, it's seeing less and less revenue being created. Which then led me to this article from Automaton Media as well, which I thought was very interesting and definitely connects to the previous article that I just mentioned. It says here, more sequels and even more remakes of 90s and 2000s hits. Anime Industry Research Report predicts 8 major trends for 2026. Bushiroad's Anime Data Insights Lab recently published its 2026 Anime Industry Trend Forecast. I didn't even know this was a fucking thing until recently, but it's good to know because, you know, I'm always interested again in where the industry is heading towards. Outlining 8 major trends it predicts will dominate the anime market throughout the next year, and in some cases the following couple of years. Okay, so let's see. We have here apparently quantifiable data that suggests the direction that the anime industry is going to go towards. So what do the analysts reckon is going to happen in the near future for anime and manga? Let's find out. From data analysis perspectives, Yutsudo identifies 4 key trends likely to emerge in 2026, the first of which is an increase in anime titles that encourage discussion and fan theories. In 2025, anime that got fans to gather and speculate on social media with each episode, think Takopi's Original Sin and Gundam G-Gox in Japan, achieved much higher long-term viewer retention. This effect allows publishers to sustain viewership without heavy advertisement, which is why we might be seeing more such titles in 2026, which I guess makes a lot of sense because ever since anime has gotten especially more popular and more easier to talk about in open spaces on the internet and say things like forums, although that culture has always existed even before the introduction of Anitube or anything like that. I mean, I was snooping around on my anime list forums when talking about my favorite anime series. I mean, hell, I have even had my own website where I reviewed anime. I mean, I guess it makes sense that, you know, for example, Takopi's Original Sin, you know, I did a video on the main channel because I wouldn't necessarily say that it got people to discuss fan theories necessarily in this case, but it was definitely a contentious series because of the themes that it presented, the way that it presented it, and how it was just such a different breath of fresh air when compared to other modern anime series. There's a reason why Takopi's Original Sin got so much attention and discussion online. It's because it was incredibly different to everything else that was coming out, not just in that season, but I would say within the past couple of years. I mean, I even said it in my Takopi video, but Takopi is legitimately one of the most interesting and well thought out and well structured and just fascinating is the only word I can describe. Fascinating anime series to have dropped, I would say, within the past 5 years. Now, granted, I haven't seen every anime in the past 5 years. In fact, I've seen very little anime in the past 5 years because nothing has really looked all that interesting. Everything has just kind of been a carbon copy of a carbon copy of a carbon copy, aka, you know, the recent thing we talked about with Kadokawa, for instance. It's because everything just feels so incestuous. Everything just feels like it's feeding off of other works in the same media, and that just becomes kind of boring, especially if you've seen some of the best ones or the ones that pave the way for that particular genre, for example. Now, it also makes sense with Gundam G-Gox. Although I didn't watch it, I have a lot of friends who are massive Gundam fans, who are massive mecha fans, especially in Japan, and G-Gox, again, was just kind of a new breath of fresh air. It kind of lit the spark, if you will, in the mecha fandom and the Gundam fandom, which got a lot of people talking about it. Now, I personally didn't watch it, but I've only heard good things about it, even if you're not necessarily a Gundam fan. And eventually, I would like to go check it out. But, you know, for me personally, I'm still kind of making my way through the Gundam franchise, so you're gonna have to give your boy a little bit of a second to catch up on everything. The next one doesn't come as a big surprise, but the study anticipates a continued increase in remakes, particularly of 90s and early 2000s anime. This is directly related to anime fans who are now in their 30s and 40s having increased purchasing power, and we have a picture of the recent Ranma Half readaptation, which I thoroughly enjoyed. As someone who grew up with the original Ranma Half, as someone who absolutely loved the manga growing up, just loved everything Takashi Rumiko created, especially during the early years of Takashi Rumiko's career, you know, I thoroughly enjoyed this remake, but it's kind of difficult to go up to, let's say, a 15-year-old anime fan today who just got into anime over the pandemic, who's only watched Jujutsu Kaisen and One Piece, to go like, hey, you should check out this 90s adaptation of a kung fu anime about a guy being changed into a girl every time he gets hot water put on him. Like, it's a little bit of a harder sell because it's just so much more of an anime lover's anime, if you will. It is so anime to the point where the average anime fan of today, who again only watches, I guess, the big shonen shows like Jujutsu Kaisen, like Chainsaw Man, like One Piece, for example, it's a little bit harder for them to get into this because this isn't really a genre that is necessarily thrown into the faces of those kinds of fans. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, if you are one of those anime fans who only watches One Piece and Jujutsu Kaisen and doesn't want to even touch things like Ranma Half, for example, are necessarily bad people or bad anime fans. You can consume anime however the fuck you want. I'm not your dad. But at the end of the day, I think it's, again, the people who are now in their 30s and 40s, aka moi, aka the unks and aunts out there in the anime and weeb world, who now have not only stuck around since the 90s and 2000s to enjoy modern anime for today, but are obviously, one, very nostalgic for shows like this, and as we've discovered throughout these last couple of years, nostalgia on the internet is an incredibly powerful tool. But it's also the fact that those same people who are now in their 30s and 40s are also in the anime industry. It's the fact that the people who grew up watching things like the original Ranma Half or the 90s and early 2000s anime are now old enough to be the ones who are also making the anime. So obviously, if you grew up watching things like Ranma Half and you're put onto a project where you are indirectly or directly involved in readapting an anime that is from your childhood, then obviously you are going to be a lot more passionate. You're obviously going to be a lot more excited to relive that nostalgia with the audience you are making it for. I mean, if you think back to example, you know, when Megalobox came out, right? Like, that was created because I believe it was the 50th anniversary of Ashita no Jo, which, you know, is a fucking classic from the 70s and 60s, but now the people who grew up watching Ashita no Jo were responsible in creating Megalobox, which is, I guess, set in the same universe or whatever it was. I forget exactly what the correlation is, but I'm sure it works in some degree, but isn't necessarily going to, like, revitalize the anime industry. Personally, I don't think so, especially in the West. I mean, look, if you are one of those people who are watching this video right now who had never heard of Ranma Half up until you saw the recent readaptation of Ranma Half and you thoroughly enjoyed it, then good on you, because Ranma Half is a fantastic show that I have a lot of nostalgia for personally. And I'm glad that, you know, the fact that the anime industry is able to push these more nostalgic 90s and early 2000s show onto a new audience, and if they end up enjoying it, then that's only great for the people who grew up with it, obviously. But again, I think it's a lot harder to sell these kinds of shows to more of these, like, newer audiences who, again, are just skimming across the surface of the anime world with the bigger shows, the bigger shonen shows like Jujutsu Kaisen or One Piece or Chainsaw Man, etc., because that's not really the anime that they perceive, right? Like, this is, I think, to a lot of those kinds of fans, a show like Ranma Half would just be some, like, weirder anime, if you will, quote-unquote weirder anime that doesn't align with how they view modern anime. But anyway, let's keep going. Additionally, the data points to changes in how anime gains attention in the following year, with music and shorts/reels becoming an increasingly frequent entry point for new fans. Look at the Chainsaw Man's Reze dance that comes to mind. Rather than opening and ending themes becoming popular after an anime succeeds, songs and short clips are now spreading first on platforms such as TikTok or YouTube, leading new viewers to discover the source material. And I think that's a big reason why, for example, you didn't really see a massive rise of audiences for shows like Ranma Half, because, it's a little bit harder, I think, for the average post-COVID anime fan to, make a reel or a short on this particular character, for example, or anything in this particular art style, and for it to pop off when you compare it to, say, something like Jujutsu Kaisen, for example, something that is a lot more, I guess, focused on the visual hype and the visual aspect that is usually the first thing that people notice when you go onto shorts or TikToks or any of that kind of stuff. The biggest thing with shorts and TikToks, I would say, as someone who has been making shorts and TikToks now and is trying to understand, I guess, the psychology of how shorts and TikToks tap into a lot of young people's brains, is that it's all visual first, and the concept kind of comes later. That's a big reason why, for example, you had, big trends of, say, Reze's dance on TikTok, or you have all of these, fight compilations from Jujutsu Kaisen or Attack on Titan or One Piece, because it's all a visual spectacle. And that's not to say that, these shows don't have any substance to it or anything like that. That's not necessarily the case, and I'm not trying to say that, but I think to a lot of those fans who, again, got into it through things like short form content, the visual spectacle is the big main talking point. And look, who can blame them? As much as I'm personally not a massive fan of Jujutsu Kaisen, I can also admit that, some of the fighting choreography and some of the action scenes in Jujutsu Kaisen are fucking insane. They're so goddamn good. Some of the best Gengar and, animation choreography that I've seen in a very, very long time in anime, if ever. So, it's no fucking surprise that these kinds of fight compilations become memes, become big on short form content, and therefore drive a massive horde of younger audiences who want to watch it in its full context. Lastly, Yutsudo suggests that more anime titles will see growth later in their broadcast run rather than at premiere. In 2025, several titles with weak early viewership went on to gain popularity through streaming platform releases, viral clips, or external events such as theatrical screenings. The report predicts more of these kinds of late bloomers to emerge in 2026. And Jujutsu Kaisen, Demon Slayer, great examples of that. I'm pretty sure, I remember Demon Slayer, when the first season of Demon Slayer came out, it got people talking and whatnot, but it wasn't until that one very famous scene, and I believe it was episode 18 or 19, it was one of the later episodes, and that clip becoming extremely viral online through, again, things like TikTok and YouTube Shorts, that really just pushed this entire idea of Demon Slayer being this visual marvel and spectacle that even non-anime fans could enjoy. And what also helped in the case with Demon Slayer, for example, were the theatrical releases. I think the recent Demon Slayer movie, the part one of the last parts of the Demon Slayer story, I think that recent movie has now become the highest grossing Japanese film ever. Not Japanese animated film, Japanese film of all time is the Demon Slayer movie, which is fucking insane to think. And that's only helping it to just push the series in its entirety because of these big theatrical screenings, which, obviously are breaking some records and are doing some impressive numbers both in Japan and in the West. The next four trends come from the production side of things, with Yusuke Onuki predicting a continued increase in sequels and, once again, remakes. He explains that as more companies enter the anime industry, competition for proven IPs is intensifying. Since businesses tend to greenlight productions based on measurable performance, such as the popularity of existing source material, works with track records are more likely to be adapted than originals. I think that one of the big reasons for me personally, at least from how I have seen it as an anime fan who has been around for 20, 30 years at this point now, God, I'm old, is the fact that, I think newer fan bases now, and again, post-COVID anime fans, have kind of stuck to 1 to 5 series in their minds, and everything else is just out of the box for them. Everything else is just a little bit too weird. They are completely okay with admitting to liking anime as long as it's something like One Piece, or Jujutsu Kaisen, or Attack on Titan, or Demon Slayer, or My Hero, all of the big mainstream shows that are now in the West. And again, you have every right to like those shows, don't get me wrong, but I think for a lot of anime fans, still for some reason, anything that is outside of the big mainstream shows that everyone and their mother knows, and admitting to liking shows that are outside of the big 5 to 10, if you will, is still seen as a little bit of a embarrassing thing, seen as something a little bit like more of a hidden flavor, more of like a hidden taste, if you will. Which, look, as someone who has made a career on liking weird Japanese anime cartoons, I don't think there's anything shameful about it, as long as, you treat the medium with the respect that it deserves, obviously. Another forecast suggests that non-fiction content will become bigger competition for anime in 2026. Orniki notes that real-world events, online controversies, and reality-based entertainment now increasingly compete for people's attention, which means that anime must contend not only with other fictional works, but also with rapidly updating real-world content, which I'm going to be honest with you, I do not agree with the statement whatsoever. I think it's suggesting that, news and AI and maybe like the geopolitical landscape that is currently permeating social media and stuff like that, or, reality-based entertainment like, reality TV shows and trash TV, live-action trash TV and stuff like that, has to compete with anime. I honestly disagree with that, because I think for a lot of people, anime is an escape from all of those things, and as it's always been, anime has always been, ever since its conception, has always been a medium or a through line to escape from the shittiness that is reality. And although there is I would say an increasingly larger group of people who are trying to relate in political shit and real world events and geopolitical crap into their anime and trying to make a statement out of it, I think for the average anime fan, it is two completely separate things. And if anything, again, it's an escape route for those kinds of real world events. So I think the fact that they reckon that they're competing with it is a little bit off. For me personally, anyway. The report also addresses claims of younger audiences moving away from anime. Ornuki argues that this narrative may gain traction, but that it does not necessarily reflect what's actually happening. Yeah, I don't actually think that is the case. I think more and more younger audiences are actually moving towards anime, and if anything, it's the older generation, like the unks and aunts of my generation, who are the ones who are moving away from it because of the aforementioned ties in with political leanings and real world events and, the blending of reality and fiction merging together on social media. Instead, he attributes recent declines in anime viewership within Japan to genre saturation, as well as the industry's growing focus on overseas markets, where revenue from streaming platforms often accounts for the majority of production costs. Yeah, genre saturation, aka way too much fucking isekai slop that no one gives a shit about. The fact that they just continue to pump this out as if this is what people want is the most misleading thing ever. The fact that there are literal hundreds and thousands of actually interesting concepts in the world of manga, in the world of video games, in the world of just novels in general that could easily make for some really interesting and fresh entries in the anime world is just a crime. Like the fact that we're seeing so little season 2s of acclaimed shows, and which are instead being replaced by all of these brand new, again, isekai slop that people forget after 3 months, is the thing that's probably leading to the genre saturation, and I guess the exhaustion from the average anime fan that nothing's really interesting anymore. Everything's kind of incestuous. Everything just kind of feels the same. Finally, the study highlights changes in marketing methods in the anime industry. Promotional materials are expected to increasingly rely on short and high-impact clips that showcase dramatic scenes of an anime early on. According to Ornuki, this approach is a consequence of shrinking attention spans and the need to capture interest quickly, even at the risk of showing spoilers, which again ties back to the whole TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Gen Z having little to no attention span whatsoever deal. It's been talked about many, many times, and yeah, I guess that makes sense. But to finish off this video, I want to kind of go back to a statement that was made by Maki Taro, who is the producer for shows like Tokyo Godfathers, Lane, and I think he also did Millennium Actress as well. And he made a statement here that said, everything has become shallower. Tokyo Godfather's Lane producer says the Japanese corporate mindset is why 90% of anime just adapts existing works. So it says here, the Japanese anime market has reached the size of over $21 billion in 2023 and continues to expand at a rapid pace. However, as reported by this Japanese news site, among all TV anime titles in the fall/winter season of 2025, 85.7% were based on existing source materials like manga, novels, games, and other IPs. On the other hand, original works made up only 14.3%. And while it seems like the market is walking the safe and profitable route, the lack of talented workforce and with it frameworks to support the creation of original content are what could end up setting the industry back in the long run. So Taro Maki, veteran anime producer known for his work on Tokyo Godfathers, Millennium Actress, haha, I was right, and Serial Experiments Lane, 3 fucking amazing series, by the way, that everybody should watch and is some of my favorite. I mean, Millennium Actress is my favorite Satoshi movie, Serial Experiments Lane being an incredible genre-defying show. Everyone should check it out. Reflected on the problem, pointing out Japan's businessman producer culture of playing safe as one of the main causes. As he explains, Japan is witnessing a lack of producers who aren't led by safe business decisions and profitability. There are many businessman producers, and in Japan, the system of evaluation basically focuses on minus points rather than plus points. In other words, not making any mistakes ends up being their main priority. Maki explained that in such an environment, there is no concept of taking on new challenges. That's why, as a result, only safe projects and hit genres are the ones circulating. Which, yeah, I 100% agree. And I think, again, that's the whole reason as to why modern anime just kind of feels boring nowadays. It just kind of feels stale, because when you think back to the early 2000s, the 90s especially, but even the 2010s as well, I would say the early 2010s was still holding on to this. I would say this phenomenon has only really happened within the past 5-10 years or so, but it's the fact that, again, they're only really doing safe projects and hit genres, aka the isekai boom, for instance, or big shonen shows, and that's the big reason why, for example, there has been so many remakes of 90s and 2000s shows, because those hit. Those made big money, those made big waves in the anime industry back then, and so they are confident that because that fan base is still stuck around watching the modern shows and using the power of nostalgia, they'll bring it back and just make an extra layer of profit. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing being rehashed at the end. Like, you know, there is nothing stopping us, for example, from just, you could watch the newest Ranma half and enjoy it, don't get me wrong, but there's nothing really stopping you from going back and just watching the original 90s adaptation, or hell, even just going to read the original manga, for instance. And yeah, when I think about it, there really is just this lack of originals that have been making a wave, that have been kind of created a cultural splash in the anime world as of recently, compared to, say, the early 2000s and the 90s. And that might be the reason why every time I go and check what the next season of anime is going to bring about, it's always just a season 2 of something, or a season 3, 4, 5 of something, or a remake of something, or again, just the same genres over and over and over again, that if you've seen a handful of the 5 best ones of that genre, you don't really need to go and watch the rest, because they're not really doing anything new, they're not really doing anything interesting, and they're probably not going to hold your attention for more than an episode. As suggested by Maki, this kind of corporate mindset is what might be holding Japan back from creating more original works, and why the industry is oversaturated with safe adaptations. Nowadays, original works like manga or novel become hits, and then they get an anime adaptation, which would tie into the business of the publisher. Almost 90% of the whole industry is built around this kind of framework. This leaves no room for new anime creators to thrive. Ideally, I'd be fine with around 70% of new titles being safe, but I think that the remaining 30% should be turning towards taking on new challenges. We can create a healthy anime industry only if we manage to find this balance. Which, yes, I absolutely agree with, as someone who appreciates anime as an art form and who understands that I've seen some absolutely brilliant original anime that have come out, aka, you know, look at like Tokyo Godfathers, Millennium Actress, Serial Experiments Lane, and even here we have In This Corner of the World, which I'm also pretty sure Maki worked on as well. But here's the problem that I think is very prevalent, especially in the West. It's the fact that your average post-COVID anime fan doesn't really give a fuck. The average anime fan doesn't sit down and scratch their beard and think about the philosophical and epistemological aspects of Serial Experiments Lain, or try to want to be challenged to understand the winding and twisting, visual fuckery that is a Tokyo Godfathers or Millennium Actress. They want to watch just some cut and dry meat and potatoes, shonen, good action, hot characters, doing these like visual spectacles where it's like good guy versus bad guy and big fights consume, explosions happen, and yeah, it's a big Marvel. And speaking of Marvel, that's another reason why people got bored of the whole Marvel and DC like superhero MCU type movies as well. It's because it was just following the same formula. But at the same time, it still makes big bucks because it's a familiar concept that is easily digestible, that is easily shareable, and that is easy to understand. Because the average anime fan does not want to be challenged by any kind of conceptual work or any kind of interesting or unique thing. Now, that's not to say that anime fans like that don't exist at all. I mean, I am certainly one of those people, and I'm sure a lot of you guys watching love to be, conceptually challenged and want to watch something completely new in the anime fandom. But unfortunately, we are not the majority, and the majority of anime fans do not sit and watch shows like Millennium Actress or In This Corner of the World. They don't even know that these things exist because it's not the thing that makes money, unfortunately. Because, again, it's just not appreciated as a piece of art, in my opinion. Acclaimed films like In This Corner of the World, which Maki personally worked on, didn't just appear as immediate hits. It took director Sunao Katabuchi around 3 mid-performing original works before he hit it big with In This Corner of the World. Even Hayao Miyazaki had to go through some trial and error before producing his first hits, and the role of a producer is precisely to create room for those kinds of challenges. That is why Maki suggests that there should be more spaces that encourage experimentation with unconventional, difficult to understand anime that doesn't completely conform to what's the most profitable. The truth is, reactions from the audience are not something that can be predicted, and the difficult to understand works are there precisely to foster an audience. Back in the day, there was a culture of watching slightly complex films at small art house theaters, and that's what gave us some room to take on new things ourselves. But now there are no such spaces, and I feel everything has become a bit shallower. But here's the thing that I just want to touch upon with this is that, yes, I agree. But unfortunately, this is not just an anime problem. Even the cinema world is running into this issue as well. Because I don't think the average, cinema enjoyer or anime watcher wants to sit through these difficult to understand works, because I think for a lot of them it just feels like homework. It's not the whole reason why they want to watch anime. The average anime fan today just wants to turn their brain off and watch some kind of visual spectacle, or watch a story that is a lot easier to understand and a lot easier to share and a lot easier to get hyped around. I don't think the average anime TikTok user is going to make fucking shorts on In This Corner of the World or Millennium Actress or anything like that and expect to pop off and create some kind of discourse in their comments, right? Like, that's not what these, and this is not like me yelling at the cloud, this is not old man yelling at cloud and being like, oh, these kids don't understand art today, because I think adults who are coming into the anime world post-COVID as well are also in the same boat, because I think because of things like YouTube Shorts and just this oversaturation of entertainment in cinema, in music, in art, in anime, has now just turned it into just this consumable product. Like, I remember seeing an article, and I don't know if this is a real article or if this was just a fake news or whatever, which is another problem in and of itself, that says, like, there was a university in the States, for example, where the average cinematography student was really struggling to watch films during their class because they just didn't hold the attention on wanting to watch these like longer, older movies. And in my mind, I was just like, well, then why the fuck are you studying cinematography in the first place? And look, this is not me saying that every single anime fan out there needs to watch and appreciate In This Corner of the World or Millennium Actress or these more, like, as Maki says, these difficult to understand works. If you don't want to watch those, then that is completely your prerogative. I'm not forcing anyone to watch these. But it is also true that we're just not really seeing anything new and interesting, and that might honestly be one of the big reasons why modern anime just kind of feels a little bit drab. It kind of feels a little bit boring because it's just, again, the same formula over and over and over again, because anime at the end of the day is a business. It needs to make money, and what's the easiest way to make money? Is to submit to conformity, submit to the comfortability that they know has worked in the past and will probably continue to work in the past. Milk that cow until it is bone fucking dry. But yeah, that was a little bit more of a longer discussion, but obviously there was a lot that I wanted to talk about in this, and as you can see, even though I don't necessarily make videos on newer anime, modern anime and stuff like that, I'm still incredibly fascinated and committed to talking about the culture surrounding it, because again, this is a medium that not only built my career, but also is just a medium that I still continue to enjoy to this day. And don't get me wrong, even though I might pose this whole thing of, oh, modern anime is boring or is not interesting anymore, it's not to say that all anime today is crap or boring. I mean, again, I'm thoroughly enjoying Free Ren Season 2. I enjoyed the fuck out of Gachiakta. That was a breath of fresh air when it came to the shonen side of things, and there are still some smaller series that are coming out in this modern day from the anime and manga and light novel world that are still interesting and thought-provoking, and again, just a breath of fresh air. But I don't think you can deny that anime has just kind of gotten a little bit too incestuous over the years. It's just a little bit too conforming to the comfortable, if you know what I mean. But anyway, that's just my thoughts and opinions about it, and I would love to know your thoughts and opinions about it as well. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to smack my face right here, subscribe to the channel. Let's keep making big channel number go bigger. Over here next to my head, a couple more videos you can check out if you enjoyed this one, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace! Fuck.